Welcome to the Procurement Software Podcast, where we aim to educate and inspire you about how technology is changing and shaping our profession. The truth is, there's never been a more exciting time to be in procurement, but only if you're one of those organizations that's embracing the change and driving new developments. And this podcast is all about giving you the tools to help you get there. So buckle up and let's get right into this week's show. Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of the Procurement Software Podcast. First episode of 2026. I hope all of you had a great Christmas and New Year, and now it's probably a forgotten, distant memory. And in my first episode of the year, I have a guest who's going to talk to me a little bit about how it's not just about the technology, because often we fall a little bit down that rabbit hole, but we're going to try and contextualize that a little bit and talk about the people factor, how it works going into different procurement organizations of relatively different maturity, and some of the challenges and opportunities that he sees in his work. So Mike Cargiulo, very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, James. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Mike, you own a company called MJC Consulting, which I assume is your initials.
Correct.
You started that, because I remember we spoke about 5 years ago. You started that around the time of when the pandemic hit. And I was a few months in at that time too. So talk to me a little bit around the reasons of, at that time, why you decided to go your own way.
Yep. So I started the company actually a couple of years before the pandemic. The reason I started, I'd worked with a number of large companies, Merck, Comcast, Walmart, who had world-class procurement organizations. And one of the prime reasons that I thought we could add additional value, I've always been a big procurement proponent, was around external resources. So a lot of times these companies would have a need and they would bring in some consulting companies. And a lot of time these consulting companies would come in with fancy PowerPoint presentations and they would tell you what you could save and ways to get there. But they never really rolled up their sleeves and did anything. I remember a couple of times we'd be in a meeting or a conference room and there'd be 10 of them there. 2 of them would speak and the other 8 would just be taking notes. And I knew we were spending for all of them because we saw the contracts. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So really what my company is based on, and it wasn't really around just starting a consulting company, it was starting to help companies mature their procurement organizations. So what we do is we bring in experts, people who've sat in the seat, who've dealt with challenging stakeholders, challenging suppliers, complex organizations, and have delivered results. So what they do and what we look to do now is bring in procurement experts on demand. They're agile and can come in for whatever problem procurement is facing or whatever initiative they're trying to advance and come in and deliver results as opposed to just coming in with presentations. So for me, it's all around execution versus presentations, and we deliver. And that's one of the things that I think resonates with a lot of the executives and the clients that we deal with today. And that's why we've been able to grow as fast as we have, is because they see this value and they appreciate the execution and the value that we deliver.
Yeah, and it's an important distinction, isn't it, between a lot of the big consulting firms that typically will just try and give a client whoever they've got sitting on the bench because, that's their business model and they don't want people inactive for a large amount of time. Whereas you and others that have gone down this route would have specific category experts that they will have on demand that you can just bring in depending on the type of project. And I do see that picking up now. It's a hard niche to get into, but once you've established yourself, I'm seeing more and more of companies like what you do starting to gain traction now. And I think part of it, curious to get your thoughts on this, but I think part of it is just down to the fact that CPOs are realizing that they're not going to get any extra headcount, and any money that they do spend on consulting, it's got to give an obvious financial return for the CFO to grant them the money to do that. So what do you typically, when you go in, what do you typically find as the business case for them having brought you in?
You know what? It's usually around an unmet need. It could be anything from, we've had clients bring us in with a divestiture and they've got transition service agreements they need. So we've had clients, we brought in a team and we were there for, a number of months. And we help them get terms that were equivalent from the larger company they got divested from. We've had clients that use us for, various categories that they don't have experts in, like travel or something. And we bring in travel experts and we deliver results that they wouldn't normally get. And it's not something that a company of a, small, medium-sized company would look to bring in a procurement person on full time to manage a category like that, because really probably just need to go out every 3 years or so and see what's out in the marketplace. So, products are always changing, people are always changing, services are always changing. There's always new opportunities out there. You need to go out to the market on a regular basis. So they bring us in for those kinds of things. And then there's always things like, COVID, the supply chain issues around COVID, the price pressures with suppliers coming in looking for price increases every quarter. That's, companies bring us in for that. And really just any kind of an unmet need where they need procurement expertise on a, project basis, where we pretty much are kind of seen as green berets. We go in, we help them out, we deliver results, and we get out. But a lot of times, they're really so impressed with the results, they don't want us to leave, so we stay. And we've got a number of consultants that have been in for years with clients, continuing to help them find opportunities and deliver value in other areas.
And is that because the size of the companies that you typically go in and consult, they wouldn't necessarily have a category-specific expert on some of those areas of spend? Because the big enterprise organization, you mentioned travel as an example, the big enterprise organizations probably would have a category manager for travel, or at least one for professional services that knows enough about travel to be dangerous. But I guess to your point, in those types of organizations that you're going into, you might have a couple of category experts on, let's say, raw materials or IT, depending on what industry sector they're in. But for the other positions, I guess what you're saying is you're going to see a lot more generalist procurement professionals in those sizes of business.
Larger companies are definitely more established than the smaller, medium-sized companies. So the majority of our clients are small, medium-sized companies. And I don't know how you define that, but I consider medium like $1 billion to $10 billion and small under $1 billion. And that's who we go in and help. And they don't have large procurement organizations, but they do enjoy seeing our consultants come in, deliver value. And the other thing we do is we help upskill their employees. So they'll sit next to us. And I know that's the way I learned a lot. You can go to training, all the training you want, but when you have like an expert sit in and you're sitting in a negotiation with someone who's an expert and has done it for a while, and you learn what they know and how suppliers respond and how they can manage themselves in those environments with difficult suppliers, difficult stakeholders, it really resonates with them, and they really see the value, and that's how it's been able to help us grow.
So they're big enough to have significant enough spend for you to be able to move the needle when you go in, but they're not going to have typically large centers of excellence or internal training teams or internal business process experts that are part of sit under their procurement organizational umbrella, I guess is where we're at. So it's a good distinction. It's speaking as a European, our definition of mid-market is probably a little bit lower than what it is in the States, just because of the size of the relative markets in the different countries. So that's an important distinction. Who is it that you find that typically brings you in? I mean, who's the project sponsor? Is it the CPO, or is it someone on the executive board, or maybe the parent private equity company that's taken ownership? Does it vary?
It's typically like at the CPO level, head of procurement level, or the senior, procurement folks that report to those levels. And, they have the need and they see the bigger picture and they see the opportunity for value delivery.
And do they often have existing systems in terms of procurement technology? And if they do, are those systems underutilized, or do you often see completely greenfield where they're just using ERP or a finance system?
They have systems. They have, they can get us, what we typically look for is like spend data by supplier. They can get us top supplier spend. Sometimes they're not as granular as some of the other companies as far as, individual pricing for some of that, but their systems are okay. I mean, they could use some improvement, I guess, but for the most part, I think for me, there's, when you went to a procurement organization, you look to see how you can help them the most. It's all around, people, process, and technology. And for me, the order is around process first. If you wanted to go transform a procurement organization, you have to get the process. People have to understand the sourcing process. You have to have that communicated across the organization. And that's like step one. And then it's the people. You got to get the people the right people. And one of the things that we pride ourselves, and one of the things I've learned a long time ago is someone recommended to me is, if you're going to hire people, hire A players, and don't, settle. Don't just try to get somebody because you have an opening. Wait for the best, resource to get in and help drive value. So, getting the process down, getting the people down, and then the technology, I think, comes in third. But you need to have that data and those systems to help drive procurement value as well.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a quote from Steve Jobs that I'll refer to. And I'm probably misquoting this slightly, but it goes something along the lines of, a small team of A players will run rings around a larger team of B and C players. And I think that's true. And technology can certainly help in terms of, some of the market intelligence when it comes to category research and some of the heavy lifting that it can do for, especially nowadays with using AI to help write RFPs and to analyze bids and to draft category strategies. But it still takes a smart person to be able to operate that technology and get the best out of it. And I think where we're going with this, and I completely agree, by the way, I think you do have to have the right people and process in place, although process sometimes goes a little bit overly heavy in a lot of procurement organizations. But I think that the technology now enables a very good, critically thinking generalist to be able to outperform someone that's got 10 plus years of category expertise, but maybe doesn't really think very much outside of the box. I think that's how I would define it. Would you go along with that?
Yeah, I mean, you look at like AI now and the things that AI can do, and you even go back to when I first started looking at like electronic systems, and back in the early 2000s when we brought in, companies like Ariba to help do reverse auctions and get punch out sites and start to do things more automated. And you always have to, embrace those kind of things, I think, but you have to be nimble enough to know you can be flexible and move off them in the future if you need to. But even like things like now with AI, which we're starting to invest heavily in, I mean, the productivity advantages for AI and procurement companies today, I mean, I've seen, research that says you can get 25 to 40% improvements in productivity by using AI in procurement. And I've used it and we've seen it, and my consultants use it heavily, and they're seeing those improvements. We have consultants that are doing 15 to 20 contracts at a time. I mean, it's phenomenal. And so you're paying for one person, you're getting the value of, 1.5 or 1.25. And there's some companies I think that are, some of them are looking at AI as like moving really fast, which I guess is probably normal. And some companies are kind of wait and see, and some are just kind of want to just wait. But I think the benefits of AI for today and embracing that are phenomenal for the procurement organization. And just, you're not going to replace people, but the one common theme with everybody I talk to in procurement, and I probably talk to 100 procurement executives a quarter, is workload management. And everybody in procurement does not have enough hours in the day to do anything. Everyone. I mean, you just take all the stuff that's happened over the years, COVID, all the supply chain issues, all the pricing preference, all the tariff issues, all the geopolitical events, everything that happens rolls down to procurement, and procurement has to handle it. And usually, typically, they don't give you more resources to manage that. So the only way to manage that without driving everybody crazy is to start using some of the new tools like AI and help drive some of those efficiencies and some of those productivity advantages.
Yeah, 100%. You touched on a couple of areas there that I think are going to be game changers. Because now, sitting at the beginning of 2026, I see process automation in procure to pay and a lot of automation or simplification of sort of the compliance box checking type of stuff. That's table stakes now, right? I mean, any procurement team worth its salt is going to bring in robotic process automation or AI-aided automation to help with that. Yeah, the two areas that you mentioned around sourcing and contracts, they're the ones where I see real big gains for people that are sort of mid-senior, that sort of category manager, sourcing manager level. That type of stuff would have taken up a lot of their day, and it's not really something a junior buyer can do in a lot of cases. But AI can now take 3 relatively nuanced, complex quotations, and you can upload it into an AI agent and tell it to give you a summary of the major differences between those 3 quotes. Depending on how well you train it, obviously, you get out what you put in. But if it took you maybe half a day to be able to do that comparison before, AI can do that in 10 minutes if you prompt it right. So I think there's that. And then on contracts, one of the big time sucks for any procurement professional, especially those of us that haven't had much legal training, is trying to decipher what a lot of the contract terminology means and where the risks are. And I think most procurement professionals know their way around contracts reasonably well, but we're not lawyers, and we often do feel a little bit uncomfortable being put in that front line without any legal support. And to that same point, AI can do that in seconds. So yeah, I would certainly agree. And the best thing is as well, though, that type of tool, if a more generic LLM can't do it, certainly the technology that does it, you can build it using a generic platform. You don't have to go out and spend $100K or more on specialist procurement tech to be able to do that. So yeah, I agree with you there. Let's talk a little bit about savings versus value and process versus agility. But both of these are pretty hot topics right now. If you look at content that's on LinkedIn, or if you look at keynotes at conferences, there's a lot of talk around procurement moving away from cost and moving more towards added value. And I know as a consultant, primarily, I guess CPOs are bringing you in to help on cost first and foremost. But do you still see that CFOs and CPOs to that extent still view procurement in quite a narrow way as a function that just does compliance and cost savings, or do you see that worm turning slowly and your consultants being brought in to do more added value rather than the traditional cost savings projects?
I think it probably depends on the CFO or the executive, but I think for the most part, they're all starting to see the value that procurement brings, and savings is a component of that. It's probably a big component of it. But, it's all about risk and quality and service and support and innovation, and procurement is all around, and our consultants are all around that, is getting the most value for the company. So whether it's, savings or, supplier management or whatever it is, it's all around value. And I think a lot of CFOs and executives are really starting to see the value of procurement. I still tend to believe that procurement is probably one of the most underrated organizations in a company. I think they still have a way to go. They've made a lot of strides in a lot of companies, but I think there's still some opportunity there. And I think a lot of CFOs are starting to see that value. And then around agility, I think that's really important as well. And I think that's what procurement organizations need to think about going forward is, everybody's got a fixed number of resources to get the work they need to get done. And I think companies should start thinking about bringing in or having some money budgeted for that flexible resource, the agility, when those special projects like COVID or tariffs or geopolitical events or supply chain issues or whatever come up, that you can flex quickly and move that versus taking people and putting them on something they're not maybe necessarily ready for. So I think like agility and flexibility are critical for procurement organizations going forward. And it's all around value. So if you can deliver more value to your company because you're agile and flexible, then I think you're doing, the best job you can for your company. And I think companies should, and organizations, procurement organizations specifically, should start thinking along those lines and start, implementing ways to bring in things like more agility, flexibility, and value versus just savings. Because procurement doesn't want to be seen as just savings and bringing in a low cost, whatever, and just saving money. It's all around bringing value to the company and meeting the business objectives.
Yeah, and I think you touched on that in your answer, but that also extends to staffing too, doesn't it? Whether you choose to bring in a fractional expert or a consultant, or whether you choose to hire people in your team that are more generalists that can easily be deployed into different hot areas of the business at that point. Because if you've got a category expert that's done the same category for 15 years, great. But if that particular individual is not at capacity at any given point, then that's essentially wasted resource within your organization. Whereas if you have a much more adaptable, permanent or fixed headcount, that's going to make you more agile without the need. I mean, I think you probably need that too, but without the need to bring in an external consultancy or fractional expert on specific areas for specific projects.
Yep. No, I agree.
So you spoke a little bit around, I think you said the order was getting your processes in line first, then tackling your people and your capabilities, and then looking at tech. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, I think tech is not completely agnostic. I think you can have great people and great processes, but if you bring in the wrong platform, you still could fail. But I'm not going to dig too deep into that. I wanted to touch more on specifically around data, but also around company culture. If you've ever gone into somewhere and you've maybe found that they've got good people and they've got reasonable processes, but they just don't have the mandate from the very top, how would you typically go around tackling that?
That's a great question. You have to try and just sell senior leadership on the value of procurement. And I mean, I've run into that. I've run into it. Companies I've worked at, I've run into running my own company with potential clients. And some folks don't really see the value of procurement. I'm not sure why. Maybe they've had, experience that weren't optimal. But, you have to, it's really one step at a time. You have to get like small, quick wins is the best way to do it, and like demonstrate the value. And that's what I've done to my career. I mean, I've had some difficult stakeholders that didn't want anything to do with procurement. And you just went in and you have to go in and you have to understand what their needs are and what their objectives and try and see where they're coming from. Everybody has, their own priorities, and try to align around those priorities and then help deliver value one step at a time. And then eventually you get there. But it could be a long process. Like it's not, you don't just go in and say, I'm procurement, I'm here to help, and you're going to let you in. You have to deliver value and you have to demonstrate that value.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And it's never easy to actually go in and implement and do that. Where would you rate data in terms of the ability to go out and do that? So if you've gone into an organization where procurement doesn't have much of a mandate, what level of importance would you place on having good, clean data to be able to present a data-driven argument rather than just, like you say, trying to do that by influence and persuasion?
You might not like my answer, James, but I mean, data is good to have from my perspective, but it's not the driver. I mean, if you tell me a category of spend, for example, is 50 million or 100 million, and you got pretty good data on that, if you give me like some invoices and some contracts and say, go out and get a better deal, well, the better deal is all around what the business needs. It's all around going to the market with 50 million or 100 million. It doesn't really matter. You're going to get a lot of attention from the suppliers for whatever it is you're buying. So again, it's all around, delivery, assurance of supply, quality, service, innovation, and making sure you get those things that the company needs at the best possible value. And so data is good, but just, having just benchmarking data, or because benchmarking data is nice, but I mean, things are always changing. So someone can tell you this widget costs this much. You don't know when that was or whatever, but there's always new products, new services, new offerings, new suppliers. You constantly have to go out to the market and find out what that is. Otherwise, you're just looking in the past. You got to always look forward and see what's out there. And, look, AI, things like that. Like that didn't exist. And just buying data, or, I mean, the other thing about just buying like software, like I spent my whole career buying software, and I can't tell you how many software purchases went over budget, over time. And I always try to push for whenever you're going to buy any kind of large application, you want to not pay for it until it's up and running in your production environment. And the suppliers will need their revenue recognition, and they'll try and sell you that you need to have, the software will conform to specs. And once that does, and once you prove that, but that's not, it takes too long. That stuff is, and so I hate to go back to process and people, but that's 1 and 2. And the systems and the data, to me, it's important, but it's not the driver. You got to have the right people. You got to have the right process, and everybody has to understand. It's got to be communicated. And if you can get everybody to communicate the value of procurement in an organization, that's how you succeed. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, no, interesting. Always interesting to get another take. I mean, I do see the importance of data and systems, but I can certainly see where you're coming from. Where I would go from the data perspective is more around having benchmark data on should costing. I think is really important, especially if you've got a difficult stakeholder that's adamant that he or she has got a good deal with the incumbent supplier. But where I also see the importance of it is around persuasion of bringing of enabling procurement to come in and look at a certain area of spend. If you've got some spend analytics data that shows that, you've got, let's just say, a big part of unmanaged spend happens just to be the area in the organization that has the worst payment terms with the suppliers, that's a good argument then to put in front of the CFO and say, hey, IT or marketing, wherever it might be, should have some procurement involvement, and this is why. It's just one example, but that's where I guess the angle where I was coming at from a data perspective. And then with the tech, I just really see it as, if tech can eliminate waste in terms of man hours or people hours, let's say, every hour that a knowledge worker is spending on administrative tasks is an hour that they could be delivering savings or value. And I think every problem that procurement has ultimately boils back down to the challenge that no procurement team ever is well staffed, right? I mean, I think we could all sort of agree on that one. I think if you can eliminate that waste through either eliminating nonsensical process or through automating stuff that a procurement professional on a six-figure salary shouldn't really be doing, then you create that wide space to be able to go out and go after the big bucks, whether that's savings or tough line value. That would be my counter. But I always like having someone challenging me on that.
I mean, I've been doing this a long time, James, and I've been around since the XT and the AT started in IBM, and that's the first PC, and there were terminals on every desk, and there weren't large software applications. The big IT spend was mainframes and disk storage and robotic libraries, and I just think that you can bring in the best software, and data, but at the end of the day, like the easy test to see if there's an opportunity there is if procurement's not involved, and there's not a managed process around how you're buying something, and someone hasn't been out to market in a while, I don't care if someone says, we got the best deal, a friend of a friend or whatever we're dealing with, blah, blah, blah. If you haven't gone through the sourcing process, then you're not getting the best deal. So it doesn't matter what the benchmark says or what the data says, you're just not. And time again, I can just see without a lot of data, if there's opportunity. And my consultants do it, and we do opportunity assessments. And if we say there's savings there, it's there, and we get it. And we're not just going to say, you go do it, here's the savings. We'll implement it, we'll deliver the savings. And if somebody's not even sure they want to use us, we'll even stand behind the savings, we'll guarantee savings, and we'll put a percentage of our fees at risk, which I don't think a lot of companies do that today, or I don't know of any. It's just...
So here's one for you then, just as a final question before we look to wrap this up. Can a small, lean procurement team in a mid-market organization outperform a mature enterprise procurement team if they have the best tech, the right mandate, great communication skills and processes, and a can-do mindset?
If by outperform, you mean like value per resource, I guess that's kind of the way I would measure it. I think absolutely. And the reason I think that is sometimes larger, mature organizations are slower to adapt to changes. And procurement, like I said, the procurement role changes daily. Things come in, COVID, like I said, tariffs, geopolitical events, whatever. And when you're in procurement, there's three things you can count on: death, taxes, and change. And so if you're small and you're lean and you can adapt, you're flexible and you're agile, you can definitely bring in stuff like AI. And if a larger company is not ready there, or they have issues where they have to get, everybody on board to bring in some solution like that, and you can move faster, you can definitely outperform other organizations that are larger than you and have more resources. I think so. Yeah.
Fantastic. I completely agree. So, final question, Mike, before we wrap this up, what's next for you?
So we've had, fortunate to have pretty phenomenal growth. We've grown 12 times ever since COVID. There's things we're looking at now. We're looking to expand internationally. We're looking to change some of our offerings from like a time materials basis to like fixed products and things around like fractional CPO advisory services. We're looking at AI and helping companies with AI assessments and enablement studies. And we'll come back and we'll tell you recommendations for how to improve and increase the maturity of your organization in AI. We invest a lot in AI. I think I'm very big on that. You can't tell. And the other thing is we're doing to grow and scale our companies. We're starting to have discussions with companies about Series A funding, and that's going to be kind of the next step for us.
Awesome. So if you're listening to this and you think that Mike could be a good fit in terms of helping you with some of your biggest bottlenecks in your procurement organization, Mike, where's the best place that we can send them to learn more about what you do?
You can just shoot me an email, Mike_Cargiulo at MJCSourcing.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn or an email or call me direct, either thing. I think my contact info is on LinkedIn as well, my phone.
Awesome. We'll link to all of that in the show notes. Mike, it's been great having you on and really good to catch up again.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate the time. Good seeing you again.
Okay, that was Mike. And if you're looking for issues that you've got challenges with all around people and process, then Mike is the guy to go to. And then if you want to know the tech side of it and how we can help in terms of where tech can help you to move the needle and make you more efficient in your organization, then drop me a line too. Would be great to learn a little bit more about your business and your specific challenges. That's all for this episode. Don't forget, if you want to grab our Tech Max or any of our free resources, then just head to resources.entproc.com. That's also in the show notes where you can access all of our free downloads. Catch you again, same time next month. Thanks again for listening and bye for now.